This generation of Madden has been by far the worst yet. The PlayStation 2 era is considered the glory days. The 360 and PS3 era had its ups and downs, but it had some good Madden games during its time. Madden 10 was a solid all-around experience. Madden 12 is often referred to as one of the best years for franchise mode and one of the best years for the game in general. And Madden 25 is a lot of people's fan favorite due to having the best player movement we had ever seen. Now, what I consider this generation of Madden to be is Madden 15 to current Madden. While Madden 25 did have a next-gen version, the real version of that game was on PS3 and 360. 15, in my opinion, was the best of this generation so far because the gameplay wasn't flat out terrible. Playing the game felt rewarding across most of its modes. Madden 16 is what really started the downward spiral, especially for gameplay. Legacy issues started to become a much bigger problem. The introduction of the aggressive catch, the game becoming a lot more dependent on random dice rolls, and two-man animations overpowering the user control all started with Madden 16 and have been a problem ever since. While there were some great additions during these past few years like Draft Champions, the Audible on the Fly feature, and custom draft classes, the game still routinely failed at being both deep and fun. Now comes Madden 20, and everything we've heard so far sounds like a breath of fresh air for the franchise. While EA still has a long way to go, Madden 20 just simply has to deliver on what's been talked about so far, and it'll undoubtedly be the best Madden game of this generation. And not just because it's the latest version, because 18 and 19 are by far the worst on this gen, and they're the two most recent, while 15 is the best so far of this generation in my opinion. It's because of what's being brought to the table this time around. So let's talk about the 5 big reasons as to why Madden 20 is in position to outdo its predecessors of this era. Career mode. We finally have a standalone career mode back in Madden, something that has not been there at all during this current generation, and this is something that sports games absolutely thrive on. MLB The Show, NBA 2K, some of the biggest selling points of those games are being able to create your own player, take them from the unknown into the league, and then even in some cases taking him online. Now yes, there is a very bare bones career mode in Madden and has been for the past few years, but it's not the career mode of old, right? You can go into franchise mode, you can choose to be a player instead of being a coach or an owner, you can create your guy, which was very limited in terms of customization, and you basically just controlled him during a regular franchise season. There was no storylines, there was no way to really develop your character and your player, there was no pre-draft stuff, there was no college, there was no combine, there was no interviewing, there was none of that in the game. It wasn't even really a career mode, it was just create your player and control your player, that's it. Career mode is back this year, and no, it's not back in the old way of superstar mode from PS2. It's not completely back in the way that everybody wants it because it is limited to only playing a quarterback, and there are a lot of people that want to play other positions like even a kicker for instance, but we can't do that this year. But the important thing is the mode is actually back, and if we're talking about this generation, we haven't had this mode. And while it does sound like they have plans to build this out in the coming years, the fact that it is here in Madden 20 is a huge step up from everything else on this generation because we didn't have any type of story we could play that was our own character. We didn't have customization. We didn't have any college football, which is another big part of this. We get to play a little bit of college football with real college teams. We get to go through the combine, work out, and then even once you get to franchise mode, with the scenario engine being in place, our player actually has storylines that he has to play through. There's ways for him to develop his character and his personality and play through these obstacles. We have not had anything even close to this on current generation, and this is the first and one of the biggest reasons as to why Madden 20 is already head and shoulders above all the games that have come before it over the last few years. Gameplay. Now, we all know that gameplay is by far the most important part of any video game, and we also know that this is an area that Madden has seriously struggled with during this generation. We've seen a lot of bugs, a lot of legacy issues year after year. Now, don't get me wrong, every game is going to have bugs, but the difference with Madden is that they don't really ever seem to address their bugs, or not enough of them, and each year gets more and more buggier, whereas with other franchises, you naturally see ups and downs with this. Some years are better than others, but then every once in a while you might just have a really bad year with a lot of bugs. With Madden, it always seems to be more and more buggier each year that it goes on, and that's the big problem that people have with it. Now, both Mike Young and Clint Odenberg have come out and said that they feel this is going to be the most bug-free Madden we have had in a while. Now, the reason for this is because they said this year they had a lot of time and resources to actually invest into the gameplay, and while that should be the case every year for any game, you should be putting most of your investment into the gameplay because that is the core of the game. It just doesn't always work out that way for video games, as we've seen not only with Madden but with other games. That's why you have years where gameplay is so much worse than a previous year. But this year they have been proclaiming, both in Game Informer articles and even Clint Odenberg directly to me, they have said that, they had a lot of time to clean up animations this year, which has been another big gripe of Madden. The animations are too dominant. They've had time to clean those up, clean up a lot of past legacy issues, and the fact that they're proclaiming it to be the most bug-free game we've had in a while, kind of says something to me, just because they've never proclaimed that. I've never heard them proclaim that. Sure, they always say, we're working on gameplay. We're going to make gameplay better this year. But they've never proclaimed to actually fix bugs and fix a lot of issues, specifically animations. And they both have said that this year. So again, it goes back to what I stated at the beginning of the video. If they deliver on what they say, that is the key. If they deliver, Madden 20 is a layup in terms of being better than everything else we've had on this generation from EA in terms of Madden. So that is another big reason the gameplay should be the most bug-free we've seen in a while. The scenario engine. Now, outside of career mode, the scenario engine is the second biggest addition to the game this year, and it's just what it sounds like. It creates scenarios. This is for franchise mode and for your career mode. Now, one of the biggest complaints we've seen about franchise mode, outside of it not being deep enough, is that there's no real immersion or any type of character or storylines in this mode. It's basically you're just managing your stats, signing players, cutting players, and just playing games. It's a really boring playthrough for most people, but with the scenario engine, that changes everything. Now you have to handle the morale of your team, certain, high profile players, your staff, all of these things. So if you're, for example, not getting your star wide receiver enough targets, he might want to get traded, or he might get aggravated, and you have to work around this. If you try to franchise tag a player, he could hold out. If you cut a veteran player, that could hurt the morale of your team, and that could make it harder to re-sign certain players because maybe they feel that you weren't loyal enough to one of the key veterans in the locker room. And there's tons of these different scenarios, and it's made to kind of, adjust each week. There's different week-to-week scenarios, but there's also branching scenarios that could last over the course of a season or even go into the next season, both for your career mode player and for the franchise team that you're managing. And this is going to add immersion that we have really never seen in Madden, because we've never really had a lot of these storylines really dictate how you had to manage your players and how you had to make sure you were satisfying your star players and, the demands of the players and things that are happening also in game. If you lose a game or a player plays bad in a game, that could affect other players on your team. Or when you're going up against other high-level players like a J.J. Watt they gave an example of, your coach might talk to you, or you as the coach may have to look at your team and say, okay, how are we going to get around J.J. Watt? We need to make sure he doesn't get any sacks. How many yards do you think we could, accumulate in this game? Can we win this game and kind of neutralize J.J. Watt? And they'll give you certain goals, and you can select which of these goals you think are obtainable. And if you complete these goals, you get more XP for your players or for your created player. So anytime you're going up against, let's say you're going up against a Julio Jones, you might have a scenario where you say, we need to hold him, under 50 yards this game. If we feel like we could hold him under 50 yards, we have a good shot at winning this game. How are we going to hold him under 50 yards? So this creates a whole layer of, depth to franchise mode that we have never seen, not only this generation, but we've really never seen deep scenarios. And even the past Maddens, we've seen little things, but nothing like what they're planning to implement this year. So that is another big reason as to why Madden 20 will be the best Madden on this current generation. Superstar abilities. Now, superstar abilities is really interesting because this is another complaint that a lot of people have about Madden, is that all the players don't really feel different. They don't feel unique to their true selves. They all kind of play the same outside of speed. Speed is the only thing that really differentiates players. Tyreek Hill stands out because of how fast he is, but Aaron Donald doesn't necessarily stand out for being as good of a pass rusher as he is compared to the average pass rushers in Madden. Guys like Julian Edelman and Adam Thielen don't really stand out in Madden because they're not super big and they're not super fast. But in real life, these players all play a role and are hard to cover when they're put in the right position, and that's what superstar abilities are bringing back to the game. Each player, at least big name player that, has a unique style, you're going to feel that in Madden. So the pocket passers are going to have different type of abilities that, mobile QBs won't have, and vice versa. Guys like Patrick Mahomes, the superstar type players, are going to have even special abilities, more special abilities in the game, like you can get them in the zone and they can throw a little bit further, or they can make those incredible moves on the run just like he does in real life, which is something you don't see that many other players doing. Guys like a Julian Edelman, when you put him in the slot, he's going to thrive. He's going to get more open in the slot because that's what he does in real life. But if you put him on the outside, he's not really going to be that effective. So what these superstar abilities have done is it's finally made a way to make these players play unique in the game. Aaron Donald's going to be more feared than the average pass rusher. You know, the nimble running backs are going to be more feared in the open field than the bigger backs, whereas the bigger backs are going to be more feared in the one-on-one situations where you're trying to bring them down, but you know that they can run you over. This is going to add a whole nother layer to the gameplay that we haven't seen, and the closest thing we have seen to this was the weapon system back in 08 and 09. But it really didn't change the gameplay that much. It was more so a cosmetic feature that lets you know who was good at what, but this new ability feature actually is going to affect how these guys play in game, and it's realistic to their real life self. So if you put them in the right position to succeed in the game, you're going to notice these guys shine and stand out when you manage them the correct way. So this is another reason why Madden 20 will be the best on this current generation. And last but not least, franchise mode. Franchise mode is the heart and soul of the game. It's what got a lot of people into this game, and we are going to be seeing the deepest franchise mode that we have seen on this generation. Going back to Madden 13 kind of is when franchise mode took a nosedive, lost a lot of features, and there's actually a good reason as to why this happened, which I'll be revealing in an interview in an upcoming video, so stay tuned for that. But we have not really seen franchise mode start to get built back out until a little bit this year. We saw that needle finally start moving in the right direction with things like custom draft classes, specialty positions on the depth chart, the archetype system, and the new upgrading system. And now going into Madden 20, we're seeing an even bigger leap with the addition of the scenario engine that's going to add immersion to the mode that we have never seen. We are seeing the return of the Pro Bowl, and while this shouldn't, we shouldn't pat EA on the back for finally getting this back in the game, the fact is this hasn't been in the game on this generation, so it is big for this generation to finally have it back. We have the progression and the regression system being tuned and more realistic. Trade logic is more realistic, which has been a huge problem in the past. Contracts have been redone to be more realistic and make the decisions of who you cut and who you sign have much more of an impact, because now you can't just sign everybody you want because the contracts are going to be a lot more realistic to real life. And we've just seen so many other things, little things added that are finally moving franchise back in the right direction. And while the mode still has a very long way to go, it is by far going to be the deepest version of the mode that we have had on this generation, which says a lot because we've had a really bare bones version of this for many years, and it's finally heading in that right direction. So that's it. These are the 5 reasons why Madden 20 will be the best of this generation. Let me know how you feel. What are your expectations going forward for Madden 20, good and bad? Let me know below. Subscribe if you are new. And as always, I will see you guys next time.